Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Life is But a Dream. I am really excited for today's topic because this is something I've been thinking about talking about on my podcast since I've even thought about having one. So I'm gonna start off with a question. Actually, first thing I'm gonna start off with, in case you guys haven't noticed, the dress attire for Life is But a Dream. It's giving elevated sleepwear. It's giving life is a dream. So always be ready for it. Me and my brother had come up with this concept when we came up with the name Life is But a Dream. So little backstory, me and him have both worked at Victoria's Secret for years and years and years. He still works there. I've always been such a huge fan of not only the Victoria's Secret fashion shows, but the Savage X Fenty fashion shows, just in general, lingerie being used in everyday fashion even. It's just always been such a big part of my life, being a very passionate fashionista. I just always have found a way to integrate it into my fashion, and coming up with Life is But a Dream, it's just giving on theme, like that's why you see any guests that I have on here, they're all going to be wearing some type of fashion when it comes to sleepwear, lingerie, stuff like that. Because I do have a vision. One day you're going to be hearing me say, this episode is sponsored by Victoria's Secret, and that's what we'll be wearing, or this episode is sponsored by Savage X Fenty, or Adore Me, or any other lingerie sleepwear brand. So that being said, if you are a sleepwear lingerie brand, reach out and let's get you on here. Sponsor this next video, okay? So this topic starts off with a question, and that's how often or how many times have you been told that you are too picky? Or has anyone told you that your standards are too high, or that you're expecting too much out of a relationship, or even just your life in general? Well, I want to flip that belief, that limiting belief that anyone has ever spat at you, and let you know that standards are not walls, they're filters. One of my best friends has said this quote before, and I'm going to say it now and throughout this episode. The more amount of times you say yes to what you don't want, it'll delay the time that it takes for you to actually get what you do want. So let's just hop into what standards are. To me, I would say that standards are self-respect reflected outwards. For example, standards could be expecting consistency, or expecting respect, expecting effort. That doesn't mean luxury demands. Like, I have a standard that I have to have a new Birkin bag for every date we go on. It's has to do with your character and what you reflect within yourself, that you have the obligation to then reflect outwards. So within your partner, with any relationship in general, and what you accept in your life. So just to be clear, standards are who you are, and expectations are what you are hoping that someone else does. Do you see the difference? So, you can have super high expectations and hope that people adhere to them. But at the end of the day, if you aren't your own standards, then how can you expect people to show up that way for you? So a big reason why people don't have standards for themselves in the first place are because standards scare them. And fear of standards might come from fear of rejection or fear of being alone. So that leads people to lower their bar. Sometimes people lower their bar so low because they fear that if they do raise the bar, that they're not going to have anyone. And that's a whole nother topic on the love that you have for yourself and the relationship you have with yourself, and what you think you're deserving of. And that's going to be a whole nother topic. And a lot of this comes from conditioning. Women are taught to be easygoing, go with the flow, to not allow themselves to have standards because they think that they're going to be perceived as stuck up, or playing hard to get, or whatever other limiting belief may come of that. And speaking with women specifically, if that ever comes from a man, know that that's projection, that they are going to shame you for having standards that they can't meet. And standards are protection. Standards prevent wasted time and heartbreak. It goes back to that first saying. If you keep saying yes to what you don't want, then you will be delaying the time that you get what you actually want. So if you know what you want, and you know how you want to be treated in a relationship, and you know how you want someone to show up for you, if you say yes to a standard that is not where you want it to be, then you are wasting your time, because you're going to end up being unhappy. You're going to be resentful towards yourself and the person that you're with. And having these standards will literally repel the wrong energy, and it'll attract the energy that you want, that is right for you, that you feel is right for you. It's your choice. And just know there's always a nice way to say something. If someone doesn't meet your standard on something, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. And I say that all the time to people when they're asking me questions on how to respond to a guy, or how to respond to a date inquiry, or whatever the case may be. And I always say it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. For example, one time a guy was asking me out on a date, and he asked to go get a few drinks. One thing is, I don't drink much, really. I'll have like a little wine or something. If I were to take myself on a date, it would be a lot more intentional than just drinks. And if you're cool with just drinks, that's totally fine. I love that. But for me personally, a standard that I would hold for myself is something that's a little bit more intentional and is a little bit more thought out. And if that's not how you roll, that's perfectly fine. But that's how I roll, and that's how I choose to, because that's what I want. And so instead of trying to force something, all I said was, oh, that's very thoughtful of you, but that type of date isn't really my style. I would be excited for something a little bit more intentional. And with you saying that, you're letting them know that something that they have the power to do would make you more excited. Throwing that little word in there, that's gonna excite them. And then he came at me with, actually, how about this? Let's go out for a salsa class, and then let's go out to dinner. And going to a dance class is such a cute date idea. It's intimate, it's fun, and it's such a level up. And I didn't have to scream or yell or be sassy. I just literally was honest and just said that that's not my style of date. And if he really wanted to, he would. And so he tried something new, and it worked out. So, you can set your standards without being rude about it. It's all about how you say it. It's not about what you say. So the next thing I want to talk about is embodying the standards that you hold. Standards are not just some checklist that you hand out and expect people to adhere to them. Standards are a reflection of how you live. So if you want consistency, make sure that you are consistent with yourself. If you want generosity, then live generously and with gratitude. Gratitude is so important when it comes to receiving abundance, receiving energy, receiving the type of relationship that you want. Because if you are gracious and you have a lot of gratitude towards what you do have, then you're just going to keep getting more. You're going to keep receiving more from the universe, from your relationships, in general. Okay? Be grateful. If you want a healthy partner, take care of your own well-being. Take care of you. Make sure that you're healthy. Don't expect a man to be ambitious, to be consistent, to be healthy, to make 7-8 figures if you are someone who doesn't hold themselves to those high standards, and who doesn't have that consistency with yourself, who doesn't take care of themselves, who, because all that just becomes entitlement if you aren't walking that walk yourself. Not saying that you need to be making those 7-8 figures, but you holding that space within yourself to attract energy that is like yours, or energy that will be compatible with yours. Because if you're a bum and you're entitled, then you're not going to be generating that type of life that you think that you want. Because if you really did want it, then you would start to align yourself with what is actually compatible with that lifestyle. So always ask, am I in my femininity or am I being entitled? Because if you're in your femininity, then you're making sure that you are taken care of. You're making sure that you are an example of the respect that you want to receive. Feminine energy is about receptivity and embodying what you want to attract, and then this also goes into boundaries. Boundaries are also who we are and what we choose to allow. Keep in mind, boundaries are not something that we enforce on others or that we make people apply to. It's a reflection of what you do for yourself. So remember, true boundaries are self-responsibility. So if someone doesn't adhere to those boundaries, then you don't throw a fit, scream and yell. You just simply distance yourself. That's it. There's no drama. Just distance yourself. And that's all. That's it. That's all you need to do is just distance yourself. If someone can't honor those boundaries, then walk away. Simple as that. For example, a boundary can be if there's disrespect, I will not argue, I will not convince you, I will simply just walk away. I will remove myself from the situation because that is crossing a boundary that I have for no disrespect. So, that being said, if you require a boundary of no disrespect, that means you can't disrespect yourself and you can't be going around disrespecting people. If it's unintentional and it just, no one's perfect, but take responsibility. If you want other people to take responsibility with you, then you need to be the source of that. Standards show what we want, show what we desire, and boundaries protect that. So remember, closing out, that standards do not limit you. They filter out everything that is not meant for you. And boundaries keep you safe within that truth. The truth that you want for yourself, the life that you want, the relationships that you want. Boundaries will keep you safe there. So I invite you guys to reflect. What is the standard that you haven't upheld for yourself? And a boundary that you have let be crossed? And imagine the life that you would have, the relationships that you would have if you didn't allow that. If you stood firmly in what you believe and you walked the talk, what would your life look like? I bet you would look a lot different. Thank you guys so much for listening to this mini episode. You guys are awesome. If you're listening to this, you are why I'm here. So thank you so much. Make sure to share this with anyone who would benefit. Hint, hint, that's everybody. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye, you guys.